One happy recipient of a university medal is Tim Allen. Tim, who works for BHP, says his award has been a labour of love. He's spent the last 7 years completing a Bachelor of Engineering degree. He's confident his achievement will help his career.
For a start, I get more money, and also it shows to my employer that I can apply myself really well to the job.
Tim joins 14 other recipients who come from a broad range of faculties, including psychology, mathematics, drama and classics. The university medals are awarded to graduates who have not only received honours, but performed well throughout their entire degree and displayed an amazing discipline in their chosen subject. Bachelor of Arts student Bronwyn Rivers is also pleased with her result.
It was a surprise. It came just before Christmas, and so it was a lovely Christmas present to get. It's just confirmation that I've worked hard and done well at the course I set out to do.
The medals will be presented at graduation ceremonies later this year. Philippa Scott for NBN News. Two years in the making, and inventor Russell Mitchell has his product on the market and being manufactured in Australia. Believed to be the first of its kind, where other security cameras require wiring and specialised monitoring equipment, this camera transmits directly to a television set or video recorder, making it possible to record all events at the front door by a flick of the remote control. The camera runs from a 12-volt power supply and is fitted with a motion sensor with security light. Inventor Russell Mitchell feels confident there's a demand for his high-tech device.
Takes the risk out of answering the door or looking through a curtain. If you hear something going on outside, you just simply hit the remote control and there you can see what's going on.
The security camera has received the full endorsement of the police. Philippa Scott for NBN News.
It was a tense affair from the start. Keeper Craig Carter renewing his friendship with night striker John Markovski, while Hickman showed he wasn't going to be intimidated off or on the ball, earning a yellow card for this challenge. But it's his alleged actions in the dying stages which gained him his marching orders, following claims he used his elbow in an off-the-ball incident not captured by the camera.
I didn't see Hickey hit Joe Bakich like they've alleged. And the linesman certainly didn't. The referee didn't. He went and consulted the linesman. The linesman didn't give him any indication. He walked away looking for more support from somewhere. And I think he found that he was intimidated by the Knights players and the Knights supporters. And he felt he had to send somebody off.
From there, most players became involved in the scuffle, which lasted a minute before Hickman finally received the red card. Soccer Australia is awaiting a referee's report on both incidents, but Cosmina has played them down.
It's a beat-up. It has been a beat-up. I mean, that sort of thing used to happen fairly regularly in the National League, 10 years ago.
It marred an otherwise courageous performance by Newcastle against the defending premiers, who went 1-0 up early. The Breakers were unlucky not to level on several occasions, with the Knights going 2-0 up when Hickman gave away a penalty with 5 minutes remaining. The home side making no mistake from the spot.
It was the Christmas present every farmer had at the top of the list, rain. The green paddocks a field of dreams for farmers who had just about given up hope.
Particularly the people that were badly affected by the drought. This is the first stage of recovery. At least the grass starts to grow. Then we can look at herd recovering and sort of 12 months, 2 years down the track, there might be some money come out of it for them.
The pasture growth will allow farmers to restock and slowly rebuild what the drought stole away. But the lessons of one of the country's worst droughts will not be easily forgotten.
And what people have learnt through the drought is how to use feed efficiently, and that means keeping it short and grazing it properly, paddock management and so forth, and where you get this excess feed, take the opportunity to store it away for when we need it. We just never know when that may be.
But rain also means erosion, with countless tonnes of soil being washed out to sea.
I'm reasonably confident, certainly in the lower Hunter where we've got good ground cover, that we're getting very little erosion off the paddocks. So a lot of that brown we're seeing in the river would actually be coming from stream bank erosion.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News. The deserted beaches reflect a long wet summer, but tourism in Newcastle has never been healthier. The city's motels had 68,500 guests in the September quarter, 4,000 more than the previous peak in 1989.
Particularly with the occupancy level being up 4 percentage points above the state level, bodes well for Newcastle.
And although we might like to think it's the beautiful beaches, it's our conference centres that are attracting tourists like pins to a magnet.
Well, we had some really big meetings here in Newcastle, things like the Registered Clubs Association, which bring about 4,000 people in at one shot. We had ANZUS, we had things like the Librarians Association and so on, and it all adds up and they're very big spenders.
But Barry Jones says they won't be able to spend if they can't find a place to stay. He says Newcastle needs more accommodation to prevent having to turn tourists away.
There's a need for 4- and 5-star accommodation types. I'm not necessarily talking about hotels, but certainly of that standard, because most business conferences in Australia are held in 4- or 5-star accommodation units.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Once the chicest establishment in town, now the Great Northern, located in Newcastle's East End, has degenerated to a target for vandals. The grand ballroom and foyer remain empty, gathering dust. Not meeting fire regulations, the heritage-listed building was boarded up 12 months ago. Newcastle Greens councillor, Margaret Henry, is calling for steps to be taken to restore the hotel to its former majestic glory.
It saddens Newcastle people to see it being publicly humiliated by being demolished by neglect.
Even with the historic significance of the Great Northern Hotel, the building is privately owned, raising the question of who would pay for any restoration work. But who's going to pay for it?
I presume that's not my problem, it's not council's problem.
But is restoration for restoration's sake commercially viable? A recognised leader in adaptive reuse of historic buildings, David Rose, explains.
I think all buildings are, as far as existing buildings, are commercially viable, provided there's an end use for them and an end user.
Council is now in the process of contacting the building's owners to try and establish the Great Northern's future. Philippa Scott, NBN News. $260 million Christmas cards were sent around the country last year. To put those outdated cards to good use, the EPA is providing recycling bins. 30 million cards and envelopes were recycled last year, and the state government initiative hopes for higher numbers this year. And even though there are much bigger threats to the environment than Christmas cards, there is a good reason to make the effort.
They provide us with an opportunity to get people into the habit of recycling and to make recycling of things like Christmas cards a habitual part of our daily lives.
The recycling bins can be found at body shops and video easy centres. Philippa Scott, NBN News. It's the cycleway Newcastle and Lake Macquarie riders have been waiting for. A 15.5 kilometre corridor stretching from Adamstown to Belmont, providing a much needed bypass of the Charlestown area, disaster zone for cyclists. But years of lobbying by almost 1,000 enthusiasts are yet to achieve a positive result.
We would like the councils to develop this route as a cycleway available for pedestrians and cyclists.
The former coal line has been unused for 5 years. Newcastle and Lake Macquarie councils finally purchasing the land last year. But Newcastle Lord Mayor Greg Hees says competing interests could prevent a cycleway being built.
There is a bikeway as a historical railway, and then in the future as a modern transit way, for a light rail system.
Lake Macquarie Lord Mayor John Kilpatrick provides a slightly more optimistic view for railway fanatics and Newcastle's cycling fraternity.
I think there's a possibility of including the railway line and the cycleway in conjunction in certain parts. It widens and it narrows in certain areas.
If Council approves the development of this corridor, it would link the existing north-south and east-west cycleways, providing a backbone for Newcastle's cycling network. Both councils are establishing a joint committee to consider recommendations for the use of the corridor. Philippa Scott, NBN News.
The amnesty has been running for nearly 4 months, with more than 40 guns and knives dropped into police stations in the Hunter. Weapons like this high-powered gun are deadly, and police are keen to see them out of circulation.
Especially with prohibited weapons, it can be a danger, especially if they fall into the wrong hands.
There are fines of up to $5,000 if you're caught with an unlicensed gun, or $2,000 and/or 2 years jail for a prohibited weapon. People who have let a gun licence lapse can renew it without the normal $50 fee.
If you can prove that you've had a licence before, then you can just apply for a licence and there'll be no fees.
The amnesty, which is statewide, runs for another 5 months. Some of the weapons that are handed in are kept for display, but most are destroyed in a furnace in Sydney. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
The Australian team, consisting of local drivers John and Ron Pine, Stu Robertson and John Brown, failed to handle the early conditions. The Americans led 5-1 early, but by the halfway mark the Aussies had overtaken the visitors with a spirited comeback led by captain John Pine. The Australians continued the charge after a short stoppage for rain, with the home team going on to win 41-31. The series are a perfect lead-up for the local drivers as they prepare for the Australian Super Sedan Championship. Meanwhile, the Americans have to pick up the pieces after yet another loss as they head for Melbourne for the last 4 tests, having only won once against the Australians. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Newcastle shark meshing contractor Paul Grunzel says there has been a noticeable increase in shark numbers off the Central Coast. He says while sharks usually keep to themselves, when hungry their behaviour can be very unpredictable, describing the attack on a Wollongong fishing boat as more than a simple one-off.
They'll go a burley pot or especially if they're hungry, they'll go a burley pot or they're in feeding frenzy, they'll go a boat or a propeller, or they can be pretty vicious when they want to be.
Shark numbers have remained steady along the rest of the coast. However, a grim reminder of their presence yesterday. During the annual Golden Lure fishing tournament at Port Macquarie, fishermen caught a huge tiger shark weighing in at more than 400 kilograms. And while beachgoers are usually safe from the threat, Paul Grunzel warns swimmers to pay attention to any warnings from lifeguards.
They'll issue the warning and straight away people should do what they say and get out of the water, because they're very unpredictable, and they'll when they're hungry they'll have a go at anything, as this has been proved with having a go at a bait.
Emma Siossian, NBN News. Bananas in pyjamas are coming down the stairs and right into the homes of young children everywhere. Today, hundreds of excited youngsters filled the Newcastle Civic Centre for a sellout performance of the internationally acclaimed show. B1 and B2, the stars of the performance, delighted the young fans as they sang and danced with the teddy bears, even taking a trip to the beach.
This was the first of many kilometres to come for the young cyclists, with months of practice ahead for the cycle around Australia. It started as an idea between friends with a common interest in cycling, but has turned into an Australia-wide fundraising effort.
It's a group of 12 core riders who will be touring the continent, but at the same time coordinating with other cycling groups around the country, so there'll be several 100,000 of us all up.
They'll head north from the Sydney Opera House in early June, the start of 6 months of cycling and fundraising. Sponsors have already started to come to the party, but many more will be needed if they're to reach their goal of $500,000.
Oh, we're a very inspired group of cyclists. It's a very healthy, viable, efficient option of transport, but more than that, it's also a way of raising sponsorship for cancer research, and that is something that, some of us have come quite close to, and it means quite a lot to us.
A food expert says people in the Hunter are eating too many takeaways, which are high in fat and sugars.
I think Newcastle people would find that they're probably having a bit more because we have increased risk of heart disease.
And while there is a perception throughout the community that Asian food is healthier than the humble meat pie, think again.
We've got westernised Chinese, which has a bit more fat and oil in it to cope with our tastes.
So why is the Hunter's population consuming foods that are quick, easy and unhealthy?
Possibly because there's high unemployment, and when people are in that situation, they like to reward themselves with something a bit special and something that's quick and they don't have to do.
And even though old habits die hard, the experts agree. The healthiest meal on the run is a salad sandwich. Philippa Scott, NBN News. Local products showcased to an 18-member team. The group will be on the Central Coast for 3 days, attending seminars, field trips to local farms, and today a visit to the Gosford Agricultural Research Station. During the past 10 days, the group has visited Sydney and the Goulburn Valley in Victoria, with representatives assessing local products with a view to importing fruits, vegetables and grains to their respective countries. But the quality of our produce is not the importers' biggest concern.
There are problems with our shipping. They believe there are problems with our shipping insofar as there are too many delays in it.
The program was organised by the University of Newcastle in conjunction with the Department of Agriculture. The aim of the 10-day trip is to expose other countries to Australian products and set up personal contacts. Philippa Scott, NBN News.
And the glory forever and ever. Amen. That beautiful hymn, Amazing Grace. It's printed on your hymn sheet, so please remain standing as we sing this hymn together. Thank you.
Going into the March election, Liberal Peter Blackmore had the most marginal seat in the state. Both parties had made Maitland an election priority, with more politicians and promises per square kilometre than anywhere else in New South Wales. Peter Blackmore held on to his seat with an increased majority, despite a statewide swing against the coalition.
I believe that the current government, the Labor government, will make any moves it can to shore up this electorate, which will make it easier for them to win.
Blackmore bases that assumption on Maitland's population growth, which has expanded the electorate beyond the quota set in 1991. It's also traditional for governments to try and influence redistributions to their benefit, despite it being an independent assessment.
The rural areas around Dungog and Strait, I think that there'll be a definite attempt to take them away from Maitland and probably try to give areas such as Curry or Woodbury back into the Maitland area.
If that proves to be the case, Mr Blackmore will face an uphill battle to remain one of only 2 coalition state members in a Labor-dominated Hunter Valley. Richard O'Leary, NBN News. It's become the signature of a bored generation, but police say they're signing their lives away. 2 teenagers have been charged over a number of recent graffiti attacks as the community tries to cope with the mounting cost of the vandalism.
The business houses in the town have been copping a bit of a pasting from it, and obviously it's costing them money to have it removed from their walls and doors and so forth.
Many businesses in the CBD have been defaced, with the favoured targets the mall and shops on the riverbank. Extra officers will be used to curb the attacks, but police admit they can't cut them out altogether and have called on Maitland Council for help.
We're also looking at approaching the local council to perhaps supply a legal wall for them to express their artistic bent, if you want to put it that way.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
The Newcastle taxi service has joined the Lions Club in an Australian first to save lives. 158 taxis in the Newcastle area will carry special organ donation stickers to make people aware of the donation program. Australia has the lowest organ donor numbers in the Western world. 5,000 people are waiting for transplants, and at least a quarter of them will die before an organ is available. You can register to be a donor through the Lions Club or when renewing your driver's licence. Donors must also make their next of kin aware of their intentions.
The Breakers qualified for the next round of the Johnny Walker Cup with a 1-1 draw against Brisbane on Saturday and are more than happy to host the encounter against Olympic starting at 7:30.
Although things have to be rushed and put into place quite quickly, yeah, it's great. We're going to be at home and hopefully a semi-final berth awaits us for Thursday against Canberra, so we were all happy out here this morning.
But tonight could be a different story. It'll be a pensive wait as two of their players face a Soccer Australia tribunal hearing in Sydney. Craig Carter and Darren Stewart, along with 5 Knights, have been cited after a melee 2 weeks ago in a Melbourne game. Defender Steve Hickman has also been asked to attend tonight's hearing as a witness. Meantime, there's a good chance world champion Costa Tszyu will return to fight in Newcastle. Speaking after his 11th round knockout of Colombian Hugo Pineda, Zoo's manager Glad Wharton said he was keen to secure more outdoor bouts and nominated Newcastle as a venue.
Arthur Wade has been involved in just about everything, and his efforts have been officially recognised. An Order of Australia, a fitting tribute for a man who founded Newcastle's Australia Day Council.
I didn't expect anything, because when you're in public life, that's your job, and you don't expect anything like this.
Mr Wade served many years on Newcastle City Council and was a member of State Parliament, but these days he devotes most of his time to helping local retirees. Newcastle's Head of Police, Chief Superintendent Heinz Muller, also received an award. He says it's proof that there are police doing good things.
It is indeed pleasing to see that people are still being recognised, and let me say this, there are still a lot of good things being done by the New South Wales Police Service.
Also recognised, Kay Sharp of the Hunter Valley Training Company for services to education, Harold Sternbeck of Cessnock for his work with the Hunter Catchment Management Trust. Major Carl Millick, also of Cessnock, received an award for his Army Reserve efforts, while Ellen Cook of Belmont North was recognised for her service to scouting, and Neville Henshaw of Cooks Hill for his involvement in surf lifesaving.
Traditionally, Toronto's January game has been one of the earliest trials of the year, but Souths combined as if they'd already had several outings. The Rabbitohs ran in 12 tries to none at Peacock Field. Howell, Mellor and Trindle all scoring 2 each. Skipper Craig Field was at his craftiest best, while Darryl Trindle also booted 2 goals to give him 12 points for the match. In racing, the Noel Mayfield Smith stable has been rocked by the death of talented galloper Mr Door. A stable mate of the late Angst, the winner of more than $200,000 had to be put down after a floating mishap following track work last week. In sailing, Lake Macquarie Skilled has continued its good run on Sydney Harbour. Skippered by Chris Nicholson and crewed by Bruce Perry and Gary Boyd, it won the second heat of the National 18-foot Championship. And in cricket, Newcastle's Rhys Soper will skipper Northern New South Wales Colts against Southern in Newcastle this weekend. In the team selected overnight, 5 others from the region were chosen.